So picture this. It's February 2025, and a forecasting institute does something that theoretically, I mean, it just shouldn't be possible.
Right. Completely impossible under the old rules of research.
Exactly. They predicted the outcome of the German federal election, and they captured all the nuance of this highly complex, like, multi-party system with a margin of error of just 0.2 percentage points on the major parties.
Which is just staggering.
It's wildly accurate. It was honestly one of the most accurate forecasts produced that entire year. And here's the catch that basically breaks the entire premise of modern market research. They didn't talk to a single human voter.
Not one.
Not one. They pulled artificial intelligence. They just simulated the entire electorate. And the simulation was, well, it was nearly flawless. So today on the deep dive, we're looking at how this, total structural simulation of the human mind is basically tearing down the walls of modern marketing.
Yeah, it's making the old ways of gathering data effectively obsolete. We are really witnessing the end of a very specific and honestly very frustrating era for anyone who makes decisions in business.
Frustrating is definitely the word. Like, if you are listening to this right now and you manage budgets or lead teams, you know this pain.
Oh, absolutely. Because for the last decade, we have been, drowning in the what?
Right. The behavioral stuff, what consumers clicked, what they bought, what they left in their cart.
Exactly. We have more behavioral data than at any point in human history, right? But decision makers consistently report feeling, well, less confident about why those behaviors are actually happening.
Yeah.
We are totally starved for the why.
Starved for the why. I love that. And that is really the core mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring this ground-up transformation in how organizations, actually understand human beings.
And we're going to break down this concept of augmented intelligence, specifically for marketing decision makers.
Yes. Because the ultimate prize at the end of this whole journey is understanding how this specific technology completely shatters the traditional silos.
The silos that separate, the research department finding the insights, the strategy team building the plan, and then the creative team actually executing the campaign.
Right. Those walls are coming down. And to guide us through this, we are pulling from a fascinating document by Dirk Ziems. It's from Concept to MAI and the Morphological AI Lab.
Yeah, it's titled From Black Box to Mind Mirror.
From Black Box to Mind Mirror. And look, the promise of this paper is massive. But I also know you listening, if you're the one signing off on strategy, you have every right to be, highly skeptical here.
You should be skeptical.
Right. Because we can't just slap the letters A and I onto a massive organizational problem and, pretend it magically fixes a broken workflow.
No, of course not. And that skepticism is really the only responsible starting point. Because transformation, it doesn't just happen automatically because your procurement department signed a check for some new enterprise software license.
Yeah, it's not a magic wand.
It's an operational tool. The success or failure of this entirely depends on the guiding principles behind the technology. If you deploy AI with a flawed philosophy, you don't get transformation. You just get, flawed, dangerous results generated at an unprecedented speed.
Which is terrifying, honestly. Getting it wrong, but just doing it way faster.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the great battle happening right now in marketing strategy, the paradigm shift. The document frames this as the oracle versus the mirror.
It's a great metaphor.
It really is. So let's start with paradigm one, the black box. This is the flawed current default for, honestly, most major corporations right now. Ziems calls it treating artificial intelligence as a deus ex machina. Walk us through what that actually looks like when a CMO tries to deploy it.
So if you think about classical theater, the deus ex machina is that sudden superhuman force that just gets lowered from the rafters to magically resolve a complex plot.
Right, the literal god from the machine just fixing everything at the end of the play.
Right. And organizations treat AI the exact same way. They view it as this overwhelming, omniscient analytical force.
So what does that look like operationally?
Operationally, a marketing department will just dump vast libraries of past tracking studies, raw CRM data, social listening metrics, and, unstructured text into an AI model.
Just a massive data dump.
A huge data dump. And they essentially just sit back and wait for the machine to chew it all up and spit out a brilliant, coherent strategy.
But the problem is, standard large language models, which is what all this is built on, they are essentially just incredibly sophisticated autocomplete engines.
That's all they are.
They don't actually know anything, right? They are just predicting the most statistically likely next word based on this massive corpus of text.
Exactly. And human behavior isn't driven by statistical likelihood. If it were, marketing would just be applied math.
Right. We'd just run a formula and be done for the day. But we are driven by these deep, irrational, often completely contradictory psychological structures.
We are super messy.
Yeah. Humans are messy. So when you feed a massive marketing dilemma into that standard engine, it just stays entirely on the surface. It can't structurally understand the deeper drivers of human behavior.
It just identifies surface patterns. So the black box AI can tell you that, people who buy brand X also tend to buy brand Y.
Okay.
But it cannot tell you the underlying psychological anxiety that actually connects those two purchases. And because it operates purely on statistical correlation, the actual logic of how it arrived at that conclusion is completely hidden from the user.
It's hidden. And this is where it becomes an existential threat to a marketing leader, I think. I always think of this approach as a corporate magic 8-ball.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Imagine you are a VP and you have a $10 million budget allocation decision on your desk. You shake up a bunch of big data in this opaque system, and an answer slowly floats up to the little window.
That'll look good.
Yeah, exactly. Outlook good. Shift budget from television to experiential activations in secondary markets. Okay, great. But you have absolutely zero visibility into the mechanical steps it took to get there.
None.
And if you have to stand in front of your CFO or the board of directors and defend that $10 million pivot, you cannot use a magic 8-ball as your defense.
You'd be fired.
You'd be fired instantly. You can't just shrug and say, well, the black box told me to do it. It reduces the entire rigorous discipline of marketing to consulting a pre-scientific oracle. You're just, blindly trusting a silicon deity.
It completely strips the decision maker of their agency.
Yeah.
It removes your ability to pressure test the logic. Because if that experiential campaign fails 6 months later, you have no diagnostic mechanism to understand where the initial logic broke down.
Because you never saw the logic in the first place.
Exactly. You only saw the output. And this vulnerability is exactly why Ziems and his team are pushing so hard for Paradigm 2,
Right.
which they call augmented intelligence.
The mirror.
The mirror. Yeah, so the defining principle of augmented intelligence is that the AI is deployed strictly and exclusively as an intelligence amplifier.
It's not a replacement.
No, it is not designed to replace human cognitive work at all. It is designed to supercharge the human mind. The absolute, non-negotiable rule of this paradigm is that human expertise remains in the lead.
And I think we need to be really specific about what in the lead actually means here, because it doesn't mean a human is just sitting at the end of a completely automated pipeline, clicking approve on whatever the machine spits out.
No, definitely not.
The human is actively driving the inquiry. But I want to get into the mechanics of how this actually operates, because the document introduces this mirroring concept. Instead of asking a single massive AI program a question, they set up a system where AI interviews AI.
Right. It is a radical structural approach. Think about traditional rigorous market research. You have a trained human qualitative researcher sitting across from a human respondent conducting a 2-hour depth interview.
Right, taking notes, probing for deeper answers.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the mirroring concept recreates that exact methodology, but in a simulated space. You deploy an AI interviewer to conduct a structured qualitative interview with an AI respondent. And then an AI researcher analyzes the resulting transcripts.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here for a second. Why go through that whole elaborate theatrical performance? If I have a powerful LLM, why wouldn't I just ask the master program, hey, give me 3 reasons why Gen Z is abandoning our brand? Why simulate 2 fake entities having a conversation?
Because the magic 8-ball problem we just talked about.
Oh, right.
The entire point of the mirror is total transparency and traceability. When an AI interviewer conducts a simulated depth interview with an AI respondent, it forces the system to generate a transcript.
A literal written transcript of the conversation.
Yes, and you, the human decision maker, can read that transcript line by line. You can see the exact phrasing of the questions. You can see how the simulated respondent reacted, where they introduced a new topic, the specific vernacular they used.
The emotional tenor of the exchange.
Exactly. Every single analytical derivation the system eventually produces is fully auditable. There is no hidden math.
That changes the board medium completely.
Total changes it.
If the CFO asks why we are targeting a specific demographic with a highly specific message, I don't just say, well, the algorithm correlated a trend.
Right, you have receipts.
I have receipts. I
Yeah.
can slide a dossier across the table and say, because when we ran 500 simulated depth interviews overnight, 80% of the respondents representing this demographic exhibited a very specific financial anxiety. And here are 3 transcripts showing exactly how they articulated that fear in their own words.
Exactly. That isn't trusting an oracle. That is providing undeniable structural proof. It restores the power dynamic. You are no longer subservient to an opaque machine.
You're managing it.
You are effectively managing a massive, fully transparent research facility that just happens to operate at light speed. You can trace the final strategic insight all the way back to the exact moment in a simulated interview where the underlying psychological need was expressed.
Wow.
But, and this is a massive but, this entire augmented intelligence ecosystem collapses instantly if those AI respondents are utterly flawlessly convincing.
Which brings us to what the document calls the secret sauce. The foundational rule here is, it's the training, stupid.
It is the single most important variable. Because standard large language models right off the shelf, they are fundamentally incapable of authentic psychological replication.
Wait, really? Even the really advanced ones?
Even those. If you open a standard consumer AI tool and ask it to act like a 35-year-old mother of 2, it does not give you deep psychological insight into motherhood. It gives you the statistical average of every mommy blog, Wikipedia article, and marketing textbook it has ever ingested.
Worthless artifacts at scale. That is the phrase the document uses, and it should honestly be terrifying to anyone paying massive enterprise fees for this technology. You aren't generating insights, you are just mass-producing hallucinations of the average.
Yep, just generic mush.
So how do we fix this intern problem? How do we get beyond the average? Because the document points to this concept of morphological training.
Right. To achieve authentic, psychologically realistic replication, you cannot just feed the model more data. More data doesn't fix it. You have to change how it processes information.
Okay.
You have to train the AI using depth psychological categories. The Morphological AI Lab specifically trains their models on concepts like multimodularity and Gestalt logic.
Okay, let's stop right there and unpack those terms, because I really need to understand the actual mechanics of this.
Yeah.
What is Gestalt logic in the context of writing an algorithm? Like, explain this to me like I'm a marketer just trying to sell a tangible product.
Sure. So a generic AI evaluates a consumer decision sequentially, almost like a checklist.
Okay.
It looks at a product and calculates. The price is competitive, check. The feature set matches the query, check. The brand reputation is positive, check. Therefore, purchase intent is high.
Right. It's very logical, very A to B to C.
Exactly. It fragments the decision into neat little cognitive and motivational sub-processes. But humans do not experience reality sequentially like that. Gestalt logic is the psychological principle that the whole is structurally different than the sum of its parts.
So it's less like reading a checklist and more like, say, tasting a complex soup.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You don't taste the salt and then the chicken broth and then the celery sequentially. You just taste soup all at once. It's a singular, holistic experience.
Exactly. And if the AI is just programmed to sequentially hunt for the salt, it completely misses the actual human experience of eating the meal. We experience holistic structural coherence. All of those variables, price, brand, aesthetic, social context, they hit us at exactly the same time, and they are instantly wrapped up in deep symbolic meaning.
Right.
Morphological training forces the AI to evaluate the product not as a collection of features, but as a symbolic object interacting with the respondent's underlying psychological needs.
But let me push back on this a bit, because coding for human irrationality sounds like an oxymoron to me. Humans are famously wildly messy. We actively desire things we know are terrible for us. We get halfway down the grocery aisle and completely change our minds based on, like, a random memory we had from childhood.
Oh, for sure.
And algorithms run on silicon chips and binary math. How can a logical system actually replicate a deeply conflicted human decision without just, crashing or reverting to a safe, generic middle ground?
Well, the breakthrough of morphological depth psychology is that it doesn't view conflict as an error code.
Oh, interesting.
It specifically embraces the inherently conflicted nature of human decisions as the core operating system. It trains the AI that humans are never moving cleanly toward one single rational goal. We are constantly managing competing tensions.
Give me an example of that.
Well, say I'm buying a car. I want the massive luxury SUV to signal status to my neighbors, but I also want the compact hybrid so my friends don't think I'm arrogant and destroying the environment.
Right. I want the status, but I want the moral high ground. They are completely opposed.
And a standard AI will average those out and tell you to buy a mid-price sedan.
Which satisfies neither desire.
Exactly. It satisfies nobody. But morphological training maps those tensions directly into the system architecture. It creates a walled garden where the AI is instructed to hold those conflicting desires simultaneously, just like a real person, and it looks for the deep, unconscious symbolic imprinting that allows the consumer to resolve that conflict.
So it doesn't average the tension, it simulates the friction.
Exactly. It simulates the friction.
Okay, we need a concrete example to really ground this theory. And the document gives us a brilliant one with the Ritter Sport case study. Let's talk about chocolate.
Yes, chocolate is a low-cost, highly emotional purchase.
Right.
For this leading chocolate brand, Concept MA didn't just write a clever prompt into a generic interface. They started with ground truth. They conducted 30 to 60 real, human, in-depth qualitative interviews.
So they started with real people.
Real people. They gathered deep human data on the emotional resonance of chocolate. And from the transcripts of those real humans, they extracted the psychological DNA to build 4 distinct, depth psychologically trained AI consumer twins.
And the names they gave these twins, I mean, they immediately paint a psychological picture. We have Sweet Tooth John, family-centered Laura, status-driven Charles, and pragmatist Paula.
Each persona acts as a vessel for a specific motivational archetype. Together, they cover the entire psychological spectrum of why a human being interacts with chocolate. And here's where we see the mechanical difference of the training.
Okay, walk me through that.
If you ask an untrained, off-the-shelf AI why a consumer buys a chocolate bar, it sounds exactly like a first-year marketing intern reading from a textbook.
Right, the worthless artifact.
Right. It will output something like, consumers purchase chocolate as a sweet treat to satisfy physiological sugar cravings during mid-afternoon energy slumps, often driven by convenience.
Which is, it's technically accurate, but it's totally sterile. It's the answer no actual human being has ever given when they are standing at the checkout counter having a visceral, emotional moment with a candy bar.
Nobody talks like that.
Yeah.
But when you deploy the morphologically trained AI, restricted to the psychological parameters of, say, family-centered Laura, the output is structurally different.
What does Laura say?
Laura doesn't buy chocolate because of a physiological sugar requirement. She buys it because, in her specific psychological architecture, chocolate is a profound symbol of family harmony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It is the physical object she breaks apart and distributes on the couch on a Friday evening to bring her chaotic, disconnected family together in one shared moment. The chocolate isn't food. It's a psychological tool for manufacturing unity.
That's incredible. And the implications of that for a marketing executive are just massive. Because if I'm given the intern answer, my strategy is super obvious. I talk about the rich taste, I highlight the premium cocoa beans, and I place the product near the registers for an impulse energy buy. But if I'm given the Laura answer, my entire campaign shifts. My packaging needs to visually suggest ease of sharing. My television spot doesn't show someone taking a bite and smiling alone. It shows the palpable, emotional relief of a stressed mother as her teenagers finally sit down next to her on the sofa.
Exactly. Those aren't just different ads. They're completely different corporate strategies derived from the exact same product.
And now, imagine the operational reality of having Laura, John, Charles, and Paula living on your secure server, just available to you 24/7.
They become an always-on advisory board.
Yes. You can test new flavor profiles, packaging redesigns, messaging frameworks with them at 2:04 a.m. on a Tuesday, and receive deep, psychologically valid feedback before your morning coffee.
It effectively ends the reliance on executive gut feeling.
Thank goodness.
The days of a creative director sitting in a boardroom and saying, well, I think a busy mom would resonate with this shade of blue. Those days are over. You don't have to guess anymore. You can access the authentic consumer perspective in real time at every single stage of the development cycle.
And this brings us to the operational breakthrough, which is how this speed fundamentally shatters organizational silos. Let's look at the pharma messaging case study from the document.
The pharma example perfectly illustrates the friction of traditional workflows. So we're looking at a large U.S. pharmaceutical corporation that needed to test messaging variants for a new vaccine. The target audience is the 50-plus demographic.
And the stakes here are incredibly high. In a highly regulated space like pharma, one wrong adjective in a consumer ad can trigger a massive defensive psychological response from patients. Or worse, trigger a regulatory audit from the government.
Oh, absolutely. The messaging has to resonate deeply with health anxieties, but it cannot cross the line into fear-mongering. It's a very tightrope.
So how do they handle it?
Well, this corporation needed deep psychological validation of their messaging, but they faced a major structural roadblock. Traditional qualitative fieldwork, recruiting the right 50-plus demographic, scheduling focus groups, conducting the interviews, transcribing the audio, having a team synthesize a report, it takes weeks.
Sometimes months.
Exactly. And they did not have weeks. So they deployed a panel of depth psychology-trained AI consumer twins in a highly structured, two-stage, semi-automated protocol.
Let's get into the mechanics of that protocol. Why 2 stages?
Because they needed to evaluate the messaging at both the micro and macro levels. Stage 1 was an intense micro-level analysis. The AI evaluated the messaging on a word-by-word basis.
Literally word by word?
Word by word.
Cool.
It was specifically trained to hunt for the most credible formulations while actively filtering out vocabulary that would be subconsciously alarming to a 50-plus patient. It was looking at the precise structural impact of individual words.
Okay, I have to pause on the hallucination risk here, because we established earlier that generic AI hallucinates.
It does.
If an open source model hallucinates a preference based on some weird Reddit thread it read in 2021, and a multi-billion-dollar pharma company bases a nationwide vaccine rollout on that hallucination, I mean, the liability is catastrophic.
That is precisely why morphological training is an absolute prerequisite, not just an optional upgrade in high-stakes environments. The system cannot be allowed to pull from the open internet. The AI twins must be rigorously constrained within the specific, validated psychological parameters of a 50-year-old managing health vulnerabilities.
So the training walls it in.
Exactly. The parameters prevent the hallucination because the AI is restricted to reacting only in ways that align with that pre-validated psychological profile.
Okay, so stage 1 scrubs the vocabulary for micro-triggers. What happens in stage 2?
Stage 2 moves to the macro level. The AI twins review all the surviving messaging variants and issue absolute keep or CT verdicts.
With a binary keep or cut.
But crucially, tying back to our mirror concept, they don't just output a binary spreadsheet. They generate plain language reasoning for every single verdict.
Oh, so they explain themselves.
Yes. A human marketer can read exactly why the twins simulating a skeptical patient felt variant A was reassuring and informative, while variant B felt aggressive and untrustworthy.
And the output volume is what completely breaks the traditional timeline here. The document states they completed the equivalent of 100 in-depth interviews in 1 hour.
1 hour.
That is roughly 12 full focus groups executed in the time it takes a human research team to just draft the recruitment screener.
The time compression is revolutionary.
Right.
But the real magic is what that time compression does to the corporate structure.
Exactly. Because let's look at the traditional siloed timeline. The strategy team writes a brief. The creative team drafts the messaging. They hand it off to the research department. The research department goes dark for a month to run the focus groups. They emerge with a massive 50-page PowerPoint deck.
Which nobody reads.
Right. They present it to the creatives. The creatives get defensive because the data contradicts their art. There are massive handoffs, friction points, and weeks of dead time where the insight slowly gets diluted.
The people who find the data are structurally walled off from the people who make the creative decisions.
Exactly. But in the augmented intelligence paradigm, the researcher is embedded directly into the creative process in real time. A copywriter can draft a paragraph, feed it into the AI twin panel, get qualitative psychological pushback within 15 minutes, rewrite the paragraph based on that insight, and test it again before their next meeting.
The copywriter is basically forced to adopt a research mindset.
Yeah, and the research methodology becomes an active, real-time participant in the creative execution. The wall between the data finder and the decision maker just vanishes. They share the same immediate workflow.
Which transitions perfectly into the concept of the full optimization loop. Because the real promise of this technology isn't just, generating an insight report faster.
Right.
It is the ability to run an entire iterative cycle diagnosis of a problem, optimization of the asset, and validation of the output inside one integrated environment. The Vodafone case study is the perfect illustration of this loop in action.
Let's talk about Vodafone. They face a classic direct response challenge. They were developing a direct mail flyer to promote a 30-day 5G trial offer.
And they needed high conversion rates.
Yeah.
So every pixel on that page mattered.
They deployed 4 specific AI consumer twins for the diagnostic phase: Julia, the agile data native; Thomas, the critical rationalist; Dieter, the best ager; and Katja, the efficient family manager.
And again, these aren't just generic demographics. These are morphologically trained profiles derived from real depth interviews of Vodafone's actual target audience.
Right. So they feed the initial flyer design into the mind mirror. What does the system diagnose?
The twins instantly flagged 3 massive psychological roadblocks that the human design team had completely missed.
Ouch. What was the first one?
First, the dominant visual color of the flyer was red. The twins identified this specific shade and application as highly aggressive and stress-inducing.
Okay, aggressive red. What's the second?
Second, the primary call to action, printed in bold text, was try for free.
Which sounds standard.
It sounds standard to a marketer, but to the psychology of these specific consumers, that phrase didn't trigger excitement. It triggered immediate subscription trap suspicion. Yeah, their psychological defense mechanisms flared up, assuming there was hidden fine print, like what's the catch?
And what was the third roadblock?
The layout on page 2. The design required the consumer to read through a multi-step instruction sequence to actually activate the trial. The twins flagged this as cognitively overwhelming. The friction was just too high for an impulse trial.
See, let's look at the traditional workflow here again. The ad agency would present this flyer. A month later, research would come back and say the red is stressful and they think it's a trap. The creatives would groan, tear up the design, and start from scratch. It's adversarial.
Very adversarial.
But in this integrated loop, the diagnostic feedback instantly triggers a strategic pivot. What was the core insight that emerged from this pushback?
The insight was that the fundamental psychological framing of the offer was wrong. They were treating it as a sales push.
Yeah.
They realized they needed to completely reframe the trial as a thank you gift. The internal strategic mantra shifted from buy me to take me, I am a secure gift.
That is a brilliant pivot. The psychological delta between buy me and take me, I am a secure gift, is enormous.
Huge.
Buy me demands an exchange of value and triggers defense. A secure gift triggers reciprocity, gratitude, and safety. So the research diagnosed the problem and authored the strategic pivot. How did that translate into the creative execution?
In the exact same continuous workflow, they optimized the asset. They stripped out the aggressive red. They rewrote the copy to reflect the secure gift framing, completely eliminating the try-for-free trap language.
Nice.
They redesigned the human testimonial on the page to feel more authentic to the target group. And to solve the cognitive overload on page 2, they deleted the complex instructions entirely and replaced them with one massive simple QR code.
But they didn't just assume this worked, right? The loop requires validation.
Precisely. They took the newly optimized flyer and ran it through a Neuron's AI attention heat map, which is a different type of AI designed purely to track visual hierarchy and predicted eye movement. The heat map scientifically validated that the consumer's attention was now flowing exactly where it needed to go, without getting hung up on stressful elements.
This case study is the exact moment the silo collapses for me. The research phase didn't just produce a PowerPoint slide about the color red. The research directly authored the new creative strategy and then instantly guided the execution of the QR code, which was then immediately validated by another AI.
It is a single, breathing workflow. The researcher, the strategist, and the designer are all operating inside the exact same digital ecosystem.
It's the ultimate manifestation of augmented intelligence. But what truly expands the scope of this document is the realization that this paradigm is not limited to simulating consumers.
Right, the expansion of the paradigm. This is where the concept scales into entirely new territories. Up until now, we've really only discussed consumer research. You know, what does the mom think of the chocolate? What does the data native think of the 5G plan?
Yeah.
But the morphological AI lab realized that once you perfect the training required to simulate a deep psychological identity, that identity doesn't have to be a shopper.
Okay, what else can it be?
If you can train a model to hold the complex, contradictory tensions of a chocolate consumer, you can train a model to hold the highly specialized technical tensions of a domain expert. The AI twin can become an AI strategist, an AI creative director, or a highly credentialed medical professional.
Which brings us back to the pharma industry, but this time on the B2B side. The document introduces us to this fascinating simulation, Dr. Freund.
Yes. Dr. Marcus Freund is a depth psychologically trained AI expert twin. He is not a patient. He simulates a highly specialized neurologist whose practice focuses entirely on multiple sclerosis, specifically relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, or RRMS.
We are talking about simulating one of the most freely educated, narrowly focused professional demographics on the planet. What are the operational capabilities of Dr. Freund? Like, what can he actually do?
His capabilities demonstrate the depth of the training. Dr. Freund can describe the typical 25-year disease trajectory of an RRMS patient in granular clinical detail.
Wow.
He understands the compounding physiological and psychological toll of the disease. He can provide simulated second opinions on complex case transitions. But his primary value to the pharma marketers is evaluating their promotional materials from a strictly medical perspective.
So the marketing team designs a campaign for a new MS drug, and they literally feed it to Dr. Freund.
Exactly. And Dr. Freund will evaluate it exactly like a skeptical neurologist. He can flag if a clinical claim feels over-optimistic based on the realities of patient compliance.
Oh, that's so useful.
Right. He could even analyze the visual symbolism in an ad, say a patient climbing a mountain, and tell the marketing team, a real neurologist will look at this and immediately dismiss it as naive marketing fluff, because my actual patients struggle to walk upstairs.
That is brutal but necessary. And the document takes this a step further with the concept of the doctor arena.
The arena, yes.
It's not just one Dr. Freund. It's multiple, varying physician AI twins forming an always available, completely honest medical advisory board. And I just have to stop and marvel at the logistical miracle this represents.
Oh, that's a nightmare usually.
If you work in medical affairs or B2B pharma marketing, convening a real-world advisory board of 5 top-tier specialized neurologists is a logistical nightmare. You are dealing with months of conference scheduling, massive honorariums, flights, hotels, legal compliance.
It takes half a year just to get them in a room. And even if you manage to get those 5 top-tier physicians into a single conference room at the Four Seasons, the data is instantly compromised by human group dynamics.
Right. If you have a highly respected senior neurologist in the room who dominates the conversation, a younger junior doctor might completely hesitate to voice a dissenting opinion or give a harsh critique.
Exactly. Professional courtesy, ego, and academic hierarchy get in the way of brutal honesty. Human group dynamics always pollute qualitative research, especially among experts.
But the doctor arena eliminates the ego and the hierarchy entirely.
Completely. You have instant access to deep, unvarnished, highly technical, professional expertise. There's no travel, no scheduling conflicts, and absolutely no professional hesitation to tell a multi-billion-dollar marketing team that their campaign is medically irresponsible.
It brings the profound depth of specialized B2B research straight into the Tuesday morning workflow. It is wild to think about a pharmaceutical creative team having a board of hypercritical AI neurologists living on their local server, ready to tear apart a campaign at a moment's notice.
It accelerates the validation process exponentially.
But these silos aren't just breaking down in the highly technical, data-heavy fields. They're also breaking down in areas that I honestly assumed were entirely immune to data. Market research is now actively invading the creative studio.
It is invading the purely intuitive space. For decades, there have been certain decisions in advertising execution that were fiercely protected as aesthetic choices, driven entirely by the gut feeling or the artistic eye of a creative director.
Right, the vibes.
Yes, and casting a commercial is the perfect example.
Let's break down how a casting decision has historically worked. A brand wants to shoot a commercial. The casting agency provides 100 headshots. A human art director or a photographer spreads them out on a table, looks at them and says, she has the right vibe, or he doesn't really feel like our brand.
It is an entirely subjective, almost instinctual process. And because it relies on the gut feeling of one or two creatives, it is incredibly risky if their subjective vibe doesn't perfectly align with the complex psychology of the target consumer.
But in the Vodafone AI casting studio case study, we see the augmented intelligence paradigm quantify this entire process.
Yes, Vodafone needed a human testimonial model for that 5G flyer. Instead of an art director pointing at a headshot, they brought in the AI consumer twins to evaluate the candidates.
So the AI data natives and the AI moms were effectively acting as the casting directors.
Exactly. They evaluated the female testimonial candidates across 3 highly specific, psychologically grounded dimensions. The first dimension was type. The AI assessed the staging versus the naturalness of the model, and whether their look felt timeless or overly tethered to a passing zeitgeist.
Okay, that makes sense.
The second dimension was body language and facial expressions.
Okay, I have to stop you here. The document mentions they analyzed this using FACS, the facial action coding system, and kinesics. Explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. How does a computer program actually analyze kinesics or body language from a static photograph? Is it using computer vision, or is a human researcher just typing in "she looks happy"?
It is entirely automated through advanced computer vision mapped to anatomical science. FACS, the facial action coding system, is a taxonomy of human facial expressions. It maps 46 distinct anatomical facial action units. When a human smiles, specific muscles contract. The computer vision scans the photograph, identifies the spatial coordinates of those specific muscle contractions, and translates the physical tension in the face into a quantifiable emotional value.
Wait, really? It's measuring muscle tension from a photo?
Yes. It isn't guessing if she looks happy. It is measuring the exact muscular contraction around the eyes that differentiates a genuine, approachable smile from a staged artificial smile. And they even validated this machine vision analysis using a specialized AI nonverbal communication expert named Dr. Selmo.
That is intensely rigorous. So they are microanalyzing the physical tension in the model's face to mathematically prove her approachability. What was the third dimension?
The third dimension was outfit scoring the wardrobe for brand fit, product alignment, and specific consumer appeal.
So they run the headshots through this gauntlet of facial geometry and psychological mapping. What were the actual results? Did it change the outcome?
It completely quantified the subjective gut feeling. The winning testimonial candidate, a persona they labeled the doer, scored an 85 overall. The AI determined that her specific mathematical combination of naturalness, genuine facial muscle contraction, and wardrobe-radiated competence, precision, and premium quality to the target audience.
And the runner-up?
The runner-up candidate, who, crucially, a human art director might have easily preferred based on personal subjective taste, only scored a 56.
Wow. The implication of this is massive for anyone listening who works on the agency or creative side. Market research no longer stops at handing over a 50-page insight report about consumer demographics and walking away.
No, it's involved in everything.
The research mechanism is now actively writing the casting brief. It is dictating the visual identity of the brand. The data doesn't just tell you what message to say. It tells you exactly who should say it, what they should wear, and the exact anatomical muscle contraction they should exhibit when they smile.
Strategy and creative execution are officially entirely fused.
Yeah.
The aesthetic silo has been permanently breached.
It really has.
And this brings us to the final and perhaps most massive convergence highlighted in the document. It is the ultimate holy grail of market research, dissolving the historical methodological divide between qualitative and quantitative research.
Oh, the qual versus quant war. If you have ever managed a marketing budget, you know this war intimately. It is the eternal struggle. Qualitative research gives you the deep psychological why you understand the emotional drivers. But because depth interviews are expensive and slow, you can only afford to talk to 30 people.
Right.
When you present that to the board, they instantly dismiss it because it lacks statistical significance. 30 people isn't a sample size, they say. Quantitative research, on the other hand, lets you survey 10,000 people to get the statistically significant what, but the answers are an inch deep. You know that 72% of people clicked button A, but you have absolutely no idea why they clicked it.
Exactly. They have historically existed as two totally separate line items on the corporate spreadsheet. They require different specialist teams, completely different timelines, and massive independent budgets.
But this paradigm changes the physical reality of that equation.
It changes the physics of research entirely. Because the exact same depth psychologically trained AI consumer twins that we use for those rich, qualitative deep dives, like family-centered Laura explaining the symbolic meaning of chocolate, can be instantly deployed as massive-scale panelists in a quantitative survey.
Wait, instantly?
Instantly.
Yeah.
You do not need to retrain the models. You do not need to commission a separate, expensive, quantitative fieldwork agency to recruit thousands of human respondents.
You essentially just clone Laura 10,000 times.
Yes. You scale the depth infinitely. You get qualitative richness at quantitative scale. And the document provides two striking validations to prove that this methodology actually holds up to real-world scrutiny, that these aren't just scaled hallucinations.
Okay, let's dive into the wall-labor.ai example. Now, a quick note to our listeners. We are looking at this strictly from a methodological, mathematical perspective today. We are not engaging with any of the political content, the candidates, or the ideologies involved. We are purely examining the data accuracy of the tool.
Understood. The validation point here is a forecast of the German federal election in February 2025. Wallabor deployed AI consumer twins that were specifically trained to simulate the full demographic and psychological spectrum of the German electorate. They then used these twins as a massive quantitative polling panel.
But let me interrupt with the skeptic's argument again. If this AI is forecasting an election, isn't it just scraping the internet, reading what the human polling agencies are predicting, and regurgitating the existing consensus? Like, how do we know it's actually simulating human voting preference and not just parroting the news?
And that's a great question, and it's the critical methodological control. The AI twins are architecturally isolated from the live internet during the polling simulation.
Oh, they are cut off.
Completely cut off. They cannot scrape contemporary news articles or aggregate human polls. They are forced to evaluate the political inputs, the platforms, the candidate messaging, strictly through the lens of their pre-trained psychological profiles. They vote based on their simulated anxieties, not based on reading a newspaper.
And the mathematical result of that isolated simulation.
The AI-driven forecast ranked among the top 4 most accurate polling institutes in the entire country. On most major parties, the AI's prediction deviated from the actual real-world human voting results by only 0.2 percentage points.
0.2 percentage points. That is just a staggering level of precision for a completely artificial system. It proves that the morphological training actually maps to real human behavior when scaled up to a population level. And there is a second validation in the corporate sector, correct?
Yes, the Eon Max Diff study. This is a complex, highly technical study looking at consumer expectations for new electricity tariffs.
Yeah.
They ran the entire study using a panel of AI twins, generating preference rankings and complex attribute importance scores.
Okay.
They then took the exact same study and ran it with a traditional, expensive panel made of real human respondents. When they overlaid the 2 data sets, the AI panel's results had a 90% correspondence rate with the real human data.
Wow. So for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time, the AI generated a 90% accurate map of a highly technical consumer preference.
Exactly.
Let's bottom line this for the marketing decision maker listening right now. What does this actually mean for their budget and their quarterly planning? Are we definitively saying that qual and quant are no longer 2 separate line items?
They are no longer separate methodologies demanding separate samples, separate agencies, and separate timelines. As Dirk Ziems brilliantly phrases it in the document, qual and quant are now simply 2 modes of the same mind mirror.
That's a great phrase.
It really is. You can start your Tuesday by conducting a deep, one-on-one psychological interview with an AI twin to understand a specific friction point in your checkout process. By Tuesday afternoon, you can instantly zoom out and deploy that exact same psychological profile across a 10,000 twin survey to see exactly what percentage of the total market shares that specific friction point. It is total methodological convergence in a single day.
2 modes of the same mind mirror. That is the perfect encapsulation of everything we've discussed today. Let's step back and summarize the massive journey we've just been on.
It's been a big one.
It really has. We started with the universal frustration of the black box AI, the opaque generic machine that gives you statistically average data without any logical traceability. We explored how augmented mind mining, powered by deep morphological training, fundamentally fixes this by creating perfectly mirrored, psychologically rich AI twins.
Right.
We saw how these twins can rigorously test pharma messaging in an hour without hallucinating, how they can completely redesign a Vodafone flyer in a single unbroken workflow, how they can simulate an elite board of B2B neurologists, and how they can even dictate visual casting choices based on the mathematical tension of a smile.
And the primary unavoidable takeaway for the executive decision maker is that the era of fragmented, siloed handovers is over. The historical false choice between qualitative depth and quantitative scale no longer exists.
It's gone.
The morphologically trained AI consumer twin is the connective tissue that makes cross-disciplinary convergence inevitable. The walls separating the research department, the strategy team, and the creative execution have been permanently dissolved.
It fundamentally rewrites how a corporation interacts with its consumers. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over on your own. It's a bit of a philosophical edge to all of this data.
I like it.
We have spent the last hour talking about how flawlessly this morphological training can map, predict, and simulate human behavior. But think about the profound implications of that accuracy.
Yeah.
If a machine can be trained to perfectly replicate the highly irrational, emotionally conflicted, and deeply symbolic reasons why we buy a specific chocolate bar or choose a 5G phone plan, what does that actually say about our own human unpredictability?
That's a deep question. because we pride ourselves on being complex, spontaneous, and uniquely individual in our choices.
We absolutely do. But if our deepest psychological quirks, our hidden financial anxieties, and our secret desires for status can be mirrored, quantified, and simulated at scale in mere milliseconds by an algorithm, are our consumer choices really as freely made as we like to believe?
Wow.
Or, when you strip away our ego, have we always been running on a kind of biological algorithm that we just couldn't see clearly until someone finally built a big enough mirror? Think about that the next time you find yourself reaching for a candy bar in the checkout aisle.
A deeply unsettling but honestly necessary question to end on.
It completely changes how you look at the opaque machine, doesn't it? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.